Since we are at IIT, an education institution, I would like to ask a question related to engineering and architectural education. There's been, at least on the engineering side, an initiative called Raising the Bar by the American Society of Civil Engineers to require a master's degree in order to get an engineering license. I don't know how it is with architecture, but I would like to hear your opinion if you think a master's degree is necessary and it would add value to the engineering and architecture profession. Thank you.
Well, I have to say we are fascinated by structure. Structure is for us a sincere part of architecture. I'm not really sure if you need to have a master in structure in order to be able to understand structure. I can tell you as an architect you have to understand everything anyway. So it's not only the structure, but you have to understand every single technical piece that needs to go into your building. And to become a master in all these professions, I think that is a bit of an impossible future. But I think it is important as an architect that you learn to think, or at least to understand the thinking of the different disciplines you are confronted with. And as long as you can do that, then I think you can very well integrate structure and make structure part of architecture and vice versa. So for me, that is the way to go.
Bill, do you have a comment on that?
Well, it's kind of interesting. As I remember, Mies van der Rohe didn't go to college, right? So I assume he didn't get a master's. But having said that, we're in a much more complex world, and so, yeah, at least in the engineering side, I think people should have a master's, just because the depth of technology we need to understand, particularly if you're going to do something new. Something that hasn't been done before, you really have to have some really substantive knowledge, and that doesn't come easy. So I'm a fan of more education than not. So all the students out there, or at least the engineer students, go to grad school. Okay, so.
But the question for the Edith Green team, when you're designing a federal building with the goals of fossil fuel free in the future and low energy usage, what criteria, financial criteria, are given to you about payback and return on investment? Because it's our taxpayers, it's our tax money that's going to these buildings. So, where do you draw the line?
Sure, and that's a tough one. I would say that the one net zero building that we have in our inventory right now is, it was a renovation project. It was a $12 million project, a straight design build. And the team came in, it cost no additional money. That was a historic building that was, it was built not to have air conditioning, so it had the thermal mass, et cetera, already in there. Can we do net zero in buildings? We can't. We're depending on technology going further. Right now, where we're doing LEED Gold in our buildings, the next version, we're having to ask ourselves if we're going to need to back away from that because we still have to deliver a project on a benchmark. We have a benchmark for all the federal buildings, courthouses, land ports of entry, OMB, Congress. They're not going to authorize. Even though we spend out of the federal buildings fund, so all the money is generated by the existing buildings, we have to get authority, and it's still every project's benchmarked. So. It's not a good answer. I'm just, but there definitely is a line. We just don't know where the line's drawn.
I would say it's a goal. There's a goal, and then there's a budget, and then there's feasibility. And we were given a certain set of targets for this building. We exceeded all of them. We started, I think, the existing building, and the average in the U.S. is an EUI, Energy Use Index, of about 125. This building was about 90 because the existing was, because Portland's a fairly mild climate. We got the EUI on that building to 31. And it's still using energy, but we had a 60% reduction.
Kerr Al-Qadmani, University of Illinois. It is to Ellen Oma. Small observation, over the last few years, we see that as if your design going into the straight edge, the right angle, vertical lines. So as if like you are overemphasizing that, like almost universally, wherever you are working in Europe or in China. So this box coming back to us big time, whether you are designing the facade or the furniture or the exterior or the interior, box. Okay, what's going on here? Is it a competition with Zaha Hadid? Just she's overemphasizing the sweeping curve, like to the max, to the extreme. So is there like a competition here over aesthetics, and is that the under?
Well, we also do a few which are not boxed, but I have to say, we started in working in Dubai, I think in 2006 or something. And we did a competition in Dubai, and we actually noticed that at a certain point, every high-rise tries to be an icon. But at the same time, if you have 1,000, let's say, freely shaped towers, at a certain point, they all look the same. So at that time, we felt a very strong desire to go just back to square one. To basically make that contrast again. And I must say, on the Rotterdam, we were actually quite intrigued, except for the fact that, of course, it is still a very recognizable building in the skyline of Rotterdam, because it's simply 3 combined towers instead of 1. But we were quite fascinated by the generic facade, because, you know, every city, I think, needs a kind of level of generic buildings as a basis. I think you go crazy. It becomes a Christmas tree at a certain point when everything tries to be louder than its neighbor. So that is a drive we have at the moment, but not in all buildings, but in a few of them.
Hi, I have 2 questions. The first is a performance question for the team from One Central Park, and that's for your reflector that where the sun hits the lower building, bounces up underneath that cantilever, and is used to light that atrium green space. And my question is, how does that affect the heating and cooling of the building? Does that add an additional need for performance from your systems? And the second question I have is for the Rotterdam team, and it was mentioned in the presentations that you have these towers that are very close together, and it creates this visual connection with your neighbor. However, there's no actual interaction with your neighbor as you might have on, you know, just a normal neighborhood house setting. And I just wanted to know your thoughts on that and the social implication of that space arrangement.
First, the heliostats. Both of these systems, the plant, the organic shading, as we call it, and the heliostats, are in addition to the energy calculations that we get the rating for. So everything that this contributes positively to the performance of the building is in addition to the already rated building. So as far as the heliostats are concerned, when you beam this light over 2 reflectors, you have some dust on the mirrors and so on. You don't have 100% of the energy going down into that atrium, for instance, in the winter. And if you take the water off, you really can get a heat gain, a desirable heat gain in that atrium. It's just very hard to model also theoretically. I think we will have to test this empirically and see how it performs exactly. And then we will adjust the program of these heliostats in a way to optimize that. But it starts with this experimental model here. And then, of course, in the summer, how much heat can we filter out with a 50 millimeter layer of water is another difficult question. It's not that easy to evaluate. You have some evaporative cooling going on there. And you still have the benefit of the light. It's just a cooler light, and it's animated by the water.
Yeah, for the Rotterdam, I have to say, you know, the building is horizontally connected for the first 10 levels, if I also include the underground levels. So that's already a lot. There was an ambition to also start connecting the buildings more on a higher level. That we tried to do with the diagonal lift that unfortunately we couldn't get to work at that time from a technical point of view. But I do think if you compare the Rotterdam to a block of, let's say, a typical block in any street of 5 stories, where you basically connect on the ground floor, and then on the upper levels you connect from a viewpoint of view, but not physically. I still think that gives you still the feeling of togetherness. And that is, so I think for me what is important in Rotterdam, it is not only a real physical connection between the functions, which is of course there on many levels already, but also a pure sense of, to create a feeling of being together without really necessarily creating on every level a horizontal connection between these functions.
Yeah, and I would like to add, as the developer of the Rotterdam, that it's indeed 3 different towers with offices, apartments, a hotel. Nevertheless, we thought it was the best idea to bring the connection, the community feeling on the ground floor and the first floor. There to bring the people together. You have the famous meeting place, the atrium. And it is better for the relation also with the public space. And because then you have all the time the changes in use of the atrium, the streets. And for us it was very important that the Rotterdam was not just a building, but that there was communication also with all the different functions already on the pier, like the theatre and the other restaurants.
Thank you. I'd like to just ask a question of the One Central Park team. Just going back to the green walls again, our research into the technical guide showed that where these green walls did fail or become a problem, it was primarily down to irrigation. It was the irrigation system kind of messed up in some way, and there's only a certain amount of tolerance for a green wall, a couple of 100 feet in the air to cope with that. And that's when it was only supplying simple water. And clearly at One Central Park, you've implemented a system of hydroponics, which is not just simple water, but it's nutrient. And I understand that in terms of reducing the soil weight. But what are the backups, and are you experiencing problems through, to my knowledge, the first time that we've seen hydroponics externally at great height on a tall building?
You are correct, Ed. One of the biggest controls is maintaining irrigation. And on an earlier building we did as a prototype, it fails because the technician comes in, does some work, turns it off, goes home and forgets it. We introduced a whole systems of alarms and backups to make sure that where any valves were closed and not operating, the pumps were signalised to the BMC control system and soon alerted to all problems. So it is foremost in the success of any green wall to have enough controls and backup to ensure that the water supply is done.
Have you experienced areas that I'd like an honest answer here, by the way, but you must have experienced parts of the building that have thrived and parts that have not thrived and become a problem, no? Or is it all uniform?
No, we did have a couple of sections because the building with the various light levels around the building, wind levels around the building, different plants. It's like anything. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. We did have a couple of plant species that didn't survive, and we soon selected another species to put in that place. That was realised fairly early in the days, and since then we've had no sort of problems, and I'll say touch wood. We're sort of monitoring it, and to date everything after that period has been flourishing well.
What percentage of plants are indigenous?
Most of them are indigenous plants.
So I'm going to direct the question to Ellen on de Rotterdam, and it's a little bit like Anthony's question, clarifying something about the plants, but I'd like to ask about the quality of space in the. I like the density of this project very much, and admire that achievement. But I was wondering about the quality of space where there is a large building volume that overhangs adjacent windows or habitable spaces, because I noticed this is also the case with Interlace as well, OMA project, where large volumes go across and there are several floors below that are habitable spaces. And I guess the question is, are these seen as, is there a negative quality of space? Are they rented out as readily as the other spaces? Or do you realize any difference between those spaces in the building and spaces that face directly out to the sunlight? You know, given that most of zoning codes are designed to, you know, step buildings back or create more daylight inside.
Now, I must say, honestly, I was, of course, very interested in how the users would behave in the building after it's finished, because, of course, there's around 6,000 people living in the building. And what is interesting to see, I have to say that the view is so amazing from all these floors, and the amount of daylight that comes into the building is also huge, that actually everywhere where you are on the floor plates, the areas are extremely well daylit. And I think what we did, we called that the shift, where you go from the low-rise over to the high-rise. There we use these levels for technical plants, so that you don't have this issue with the shading from the block above. Or we created double height spaces. So in the middle tower we have double height spaces there, and on the ends we have technical areas there, so that actually no function is suffering from that effect.
This is Paul Andrus, IIT. This is to Bill Baker. In the Cayenne Tower, the perimeter offset because of the spiral was done in a stepped configuration, so that some of the gravity load is now contributing into the moment frames on the perimeter. Is there a significant deflection difference between the perimeter moment frame that takes that gravity load and the core? And if so, how did you account for that?
Yeah, I mean, we always, in a tall building, we always have to balance the vertical movements at the outside to the inside because of just the nature of different materials, different stress levels, and also different construction sequence, because the core went up first, so it was more mature concrete when compared to the perimeter, so we had to do, so we had some elevational adjustments into the design, but no, nothing particular there. This whole thing about how to, the whole project was how to make something complex simple, and as we all know, making something simple is very difficult. And so that was the essence of our focus there, is how can we do this in a way that was buildable and simply built and could be done by a normal contractor, and also efficient, because I'm Scottish, I hate to spend money. So that was the whole thing, and this whole thing about the offset and the analogy to a pile and a pile cap, because is how to take out this extra deflection, so the extra deflection would be minimized. I won't say it went away completely, and we were pretty pleased with the way it actually came out.